This is Uncommonly Remarkable. We have surprisingly casual discussions about the lives and notable accomplishments of community leaders, entrepreneurs, and everyday folks like you and me. Think of this podcast as an opportunity to learn something new and to pick up on an entrepreneurial tip or two through open conversation. I'm Artis Beatty. I'm a doctor of optometry and the chief medical officer for MyEyeDr OD. Though we will inevitably touch on topics within my area of expertise, the opinions and conversations held here are separate from my work with my eye doctor. Today, I have the privilege of sitting down with Waleed Hamza. He's an interpreter, a veteran, and author of Occupied, a gripping memoir that takes us deep into his journey from war-torn Iraq to working alongside U.S. Special Forces and, ultimately, to rebuilding his life here in America and even beginning a ministry that strives to help other veterans acclimate to civilian life. Waleed's story is one of survival against all odds. From his childhood in Baghdad to navigating the dangers of war as a military interpreter, his experiences shed light on the human side of conflict. We learn about the impossible choices, the bonds forged in combat, and the price of service. Occupied is more than a war story. It's about identity, faith, it's about loss, and the lifelong search for belonging. This episode contains discussions of PTSD, war, and suicide ideation. These topics can be difficult, but they are incredibly important to address. If you or someone you know is struggling, know that help is available. You can call or text the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline for free, confidential support 24/7. Now, let's dive into this remarkable conversation. Waleed, welcome to the show. I am so excited to have you here, and thank you for spending some time with me.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Artis.
You know, this is a big deal for me because I don't always get to have authors come and sit and talk about things with me. And I really enjoyed reading and learned so much from reading your book, Occupied. And I know we're going to talk about it. I promise I'm not going to spoil it for people. You know, there are many, many Thunder Stealers out there. I'm not going to do that. But it was a fantastic read. And there's so much in there that I am curious about. And so hopefully we'll get to talk about some of that today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Happy to answer any questions you got.
Excellent. So the first thing I really want to talk about is you're here in the U.S. You had a long journey to get here.
Right.
And you grew up in Baghdad.
Yes.
To me, that is incredibly interesting because, you know, living in the U.S., there's so little that we really truly know about other places, particularly places in the Middle East. So can you talk a little bit about where you began your early life and growing up?
Right. So I grew up in Baghdad at a traditional family, nothing big deal. My mom and my dad used to live with their parents, my dad's parents. And then after the war broke out with Iran in 1980, all the way until 88, in the early days of that war, my dad saw an ad on TV. And it was what was shown on TV was a wedding, an Iraqi wedding that got bombed by Iranian forces or something like that. And it got people riled up. And this is the story that I heard from my mom. So I was still a little baby, a few months old, not aware of what's going on. So my dad was very motivated by that. And he ended up joining, they call it the public army. And that's a different branch that outside the conventional army that was already fighting the war, but it was they formed this public army out of the civilian population. Okay. Within a few months of my dad going to training, whatnot, and then he ended up going into the war. A few months after that, he was killed. So my biological father was murdered in the Iranian war, and I was 14 months old. I never met him. I never knew him. And my mom tells me that I'm just like him. So yeah. So my mom ended up being forced to marry my uncle. My grandparents from my dad's side wanted to keep me in the family, and you read the details in the book and how Saddam got involved and all that. And so they end up getting married, forced to be married to one another. And the family dynamic, it's on the outside, it seemed normal, but on the inside, it's nothing but normal.
Well, and it was it's interesting to me that the notion of prearranging the marriage was not anything that was out of the ordinary from a cultural perspective. It wasn't necessarily out of the ordinary for your mother to then marry someone else in the family, just culturally, was it?
It was not, but that particular situation, it wasn't desired by my mom. Let's put it this way. There's a lot of family dynamics that were in there. My uncle was the opposite of my dad. She married someone, and now she's now she's forced to marry someone else who is exact opposite of that person. Yeah. It's like both my dad, my biological father, and my uncle didn't see eye to eye in most of the cases. But here we are. That's marriage being forced by Saddam on both of them, and then just to keep me in the family. And so they both found themselves in that weird dynamic where they have to work with that. And I question a lot of what happened in my uncle's, my dad. Now I start calling him my dad. So from now on, I'm just going to call him my dad just to avoid any confusion. There was a lot of, I wondered if he had different plans, and now he was forced to go through this marriage just because of me. And did that generate any resentment towards me? Because I loved him. I grew up, he raised me, taught me all these good things, but I never felt that fatherly love from him or that normal relationship, especially after I was older and I start to understand things and pick up on a few things. And so now your uncle is now married to your mother. You knew him as dad, right?
And you're going through the normal adolescence, and somewhere along the lines you picked up somewhere that you liked languages.
Yes.
How did that happen?
So my aunt was in a College of Languages English department in Baghdad University, and she always, I was very close to her as a kid. She always played with me. She was nice and kind to me. She'd always make me all these treats and desserts and things like that. So and she was my sweet aunt that I always gravitate to. So when she went there, and I always go hang out when I go to my grandparents, hang out with her and whatnot. So I watch what she does, and so she was listening to different music. And she had George Michael was playing, and she had back then, I think it was like Madonna and Sandra or something like that. So I would listen and I just look at her amazed at how she can articulate other languages and be able to. It was fascinating to me. So that was my initial gravitational pull, if you will, to the language. After that, and when English started being introduced at school, she was the one who was helping me understand it and going through the ABCs, going through the dialogues, going through different things. And from there, it took off. And watching shows didn't help. My dad was fascinated with Remington Steele, Pierce Brosnan, and all these characters back in the day, and Clint Eastwood, of course. So I always love to watch these movies with him and just like see all the actions and see the spy drama.
It's always amazing to me when someone starts to talk about English as a language being taught, and that's something that people gravitate to learn.
Right.
And at first I thought, well, how odd is that the language would be English, and that's the one that were there different schools of language that were available, and English was the one that you gravitated towards? Or no,
English was pretty major outside the United States, particularly like most countries. Really, they teach English, and at least in Iraq, we had English as being taught starting at, I believe, 4th grade or 5th grade.
Wow.
And you start with your ABCs, you start with, normal, like little tiny dialogues, and then you build up from that. You start doing grammars and all that stuff. And then by the time you get to high school, in my senior year in high school, I was reading Oliver Twist and Hamlet and different William Shakespeare's plays or different stuff. So it increases pretty significantly by the time you get in high school. And then by the time you're ready to go to college, then you have the option and go, which is College of Languages, English department, Baghdad University. And there are 8 different languages there to pick from, but English was the top one to pick from.
And, for people who have not read the book yet, and they are going to go out and read the book, this conversation is important because a lot of what comes later is really based on the fact that you learn to speak English early and you learn to speak it very well.
Right.
And so it is when I was kind of thinking about your trajectory and the things that were important to you, like the music, the shows, and some of the songs that you mentioned, I'm familiar with because we're probably within 3 or 4 years of each other from an age perspective. And so there was a lot of nostalgia thinking about those things. But, you know, there are studies that that show that the music you listen to in your teenage years is the music that actually latches into the brain particularly differently and becomes the music that you carry throughout your life. And so as I think about some of the things that you wrote, the songs are thematic, but they kind of continue through your life. And I just think that part is very interesting to me. But so you were going through high school, you were really latching on to language, and then you had to make decisions about university life, right? And my understanding is that during the time, university was free in general, right? But you didn't always get to pick where you went. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
So once you finish high school, there is a certain score, and there's a scoreboard that a sheet that the school will hand you. You fill it out, and based on your score, you list the schools or the universities that you wish to go to, and political science comes first, and then law, and then political science, and then you have College of Languages, and then arts, and so on and so forth. And you have your score, whatever you get out of high school, and that based on the percentage of how many graduates for that year. If you have a higher amount of graduates, then the score for law school, whatnot, it will require 100 plus.
See,
if it's not, then if you have less, so it changes from one year into another.
I see.
Long story short, I end up scoring 76 out of 100.
Cool.
And that year, if I would want to go to College of Languages, I need to have, I think it was a little bit over 80. Yes. Yeah. So I had like about 4 or 5 points shy of making it. It's like, take it. Yeah. So anyways, my aunt, she went to that same college, and she got married to someone there, and he knew someone. He ended up having this connection, and this guy was a higher ranking officer in Iraqi intelligence, and who was studying that English department back then. And then he ended up, it's like, bring your papers, we'll go to the dean office. And it's like, oh, okay. So I got my papers, and we go in there and we walk in the dean office, and it's like, they just like, whatever I say, just say yes or no, don't talk. And the rest is history. I started going there for evening studies. Yeah.
And so the plan, though, was that you were going to somehow work for the government, because that was a big deal. And your grandfather was a diplomat.
Yes.
And so how did you go from, I'm going to work for the government, given what the government was at the time,
yes,
to that's not what I'm going to do?
Yeah. Well, war happened. So at that time, a lot of people don't understand. Iraq we're in like a fish tank. We're living in this bubble. Nobody in, nobody out. Everybody get to work for the government. If you don't work for the government, you're not getting. It's kind of like what we see with right now with North Korea. So you don't. There's no option. The sanctions destroyed the country. There is nothing there to do outside of that, unless your family owns some sort of business or some sort of factory, or you're related to someone or something like that. The only person I know that was related was my grandfather, and he was a diplomat, but after he was retired diplomat at that time when I was in college, but he still had some connection. He still knows some people, and he knew some people. And then, and when I was talking to him, he was like, well, the best option is really not to go in the military, is to work for the government. Like you can work kind of for the equivalent to the State Department or something like that. And if you have that language, you'd be able to go and work in certain embassies or different positions like that. And I'm like, well, I like that. And like the travel, like, ooh, that's pretty cool. So that was the plan. So the war happened, and I was my third year in college. My mom was adamant about me not serving in the military. And her reasons were, first, she lost her husband. She doesn't want to lose her son. And I was her only son. So she was very, very adamant about not letting me serve whatsoever. So in Iraq, there was a program where the translation for it is a replacement. It's basically, in Arabic, it's called the bedded. So if you pay, for example, if you pay $1 million dinar to the government, then you won't have, your son will not serve in the military. You only do flag duty for 3 months and you're done. If you're ministers of whatever son, or if you're related to someone, let's start playing CCR, Fortunate Son, right? So let's cue that music in, and basically that's exactly what happened there. If you're related to someone, if you're son of someone, you don't serve. If you have enough money, you don't serve. So her goal was that. My goal was to pursue my dream, but it's like, you know what, I'm gonna sit out one more year in college. So my third year in college, I was just turning my exams sheets are empty. Like, I don't put any answers. Like, I'm just, there you go. It's like, well, you know the answer is the answer. Like, nope, I'm not answering. Like, here you go. So I said the third year, and then my senior year, 2 months before graduation, everything started to happen with the invasion and all that, and we start hearing the news and things start getting serious. And the war broke out, and we stopped going to school. Everything shut down, and the whole country shut down. And then next thing you know, it's just like, this is pretty intense. It's different. It's not like Gulf War. It's not like anything that we've seen before.
And so you are now you're in the middle of this war. Mm-hmm. Your life is completely disrupted.
Right.
You've got this skill set with being able to mm-hmm. speak English very well.
Right.
And there was this need for interpreters mm-hmm. to be able to help. And you decided that was going to be your path.
Right. So before we go there, there's something I want to mention. Throughout this whole time, high school, middle school, high school, especially after 9/11, mm-hmm. and the sanctions started to hit, we were not doing very well. We were okay. My dad had his own business, and he had his 2 cars and things like that. It was just we were doing very well. When the sanctions hit, we went from that into really being really poor. I remember there were times where we had only rice for about 3 months, and that's the only thing we can afford to eat. So the sanctions did a number on us. I talked a lot about it, how in the book how families were struggling, and then different programs that the government implemented. But anyways, it put a lot of pressure on my dad, and my dad was drowning in debt, and I'm seeing him, and I'm watching him struggle. I see him up through the night. I see his frustrations, and even the fights that he gets into with my mom, it's all related to finances, and they're not on the same page, and this and that and the other. And it scarred me in a way as a kid, just to see my parents fight like that. But it's a reflection of what was going on to the rest of the country. You know, everybody was struggling. It's not just my family. It's not just me. It's everybody. The only person that did not get affected by the sanction was Saddam himself and his entourage. They had their own things, and whatever that comes in from different countries, it goes to them first, and then it trickles down. And at this point, we're nothing. We got nothing. We get to the point where everybody was tired of what Saddam was doing. Everybody was tired of the government and how the country went from prosperous, doing very well, to a country in shambles, really. No infrastructure, nothing. It's just a shell. The war with Iran depleted the country, then Gulf War happened, and then the sanctions, and it's time to change. So when there were 2 different opinions was going in the street at the time, when 2000 the pre-invasion in 2003, people were worried. People wanted to change, but they couldn't. So people were reluctant to do something, but they're excited and waiting for something to happen. So when the invasion happened, it didn't take that much. A lot of people were ready for a change. Like, all right, So that's why you see the invasion didn't take that long.
see.
It was just like 3 weeks. It was just like a drive, if you will, from the border all the way to Baghdad. And everybody else, all these fights that took place is mainly by the Ba'ath Party or people who, the Fedayeen at that time, they were well equipped, and the Republican Guard and certain branches of the Iraqi military that they had these type of equipment.
Right.
Yeah. So
Wow.
it was intense.
And it's part of it for me is that I remember pieces, but I was remembering pieces from having seen it on TV or read about it in a paper.
Right.
And having you describe it both in the book and now face to face.
Yeah.
It's a totally different, it's weird because you don't get that firsthand experience, and it's always colored by whatever it is that we're going to hear about what's going on.
Yeah.
Like never did we hear about about people and how the sanctions were affecting people in a way that I could connect with and understand. Right.
Yeah.
And that's always the problem with the communications and how they get colored during situations.
Absolutely. People were struggling. People were hurt. And you have on the opposite side, you have people want to protect what they already got going on. That's their gig. Saddam was showering them with gifts and money and things like that. So the people around him they want to protect that. And they knew if he goes, then all that goes. But the majority of people were hurting. A lot of people want him to be gone. And that's one of the things is for me, what sparked my interest to be a translator, not only because I have the passion and I went to college and that's my profession, that's what I do, but it's like, man, as a naive college kid, it's like, man, it's my turn. Let's build the country. Let's see what's this new future. Let's reimagine Iraq and its new future and have this some sort of democracy, if you will, in the country and build it. And let's see what it's going to look like out post Saddam. And that was my heart. That was my intention, was to help the country and help my people get through and do my job. And so one day I was at my house, and one of my friends said, it's like, hey man, is it real? He's like, no more Saddam, no more. Like, and he mentioned something that might give you a good reflection. And he said, does this mean I'm not going to see any more dirt on the sidewalk? That was his imagination of the future Iraq. What would it be?
Wow.
He was expecting that. He was looking out. What he wanted to see was that.
Wow.
What he got is a completely different story.
Yeah.
Completely different story.
To kind of talk your timeline and maybe the overarching story it was amazing to me that here you are working with U.S. Special Forces at points in your career.
Right.
But you were risking life and limb because you've got people in your own country who are no longer friend because you are working as an interpreter and helping the U.S. But then you also have people in your country who are trying to protect you because they think it's doing the right thing. Talk to me about that. Like, how did you deal with that dichotomy all the time?
It was hard. When you're in the middle of it, you don't see it as much. I remember my first job as a translator was with civil affairs. And it was mainly humanitarian. Mainly it was like, how can we help you? And then it was, so that was the job that was my first job. So it was like, I thought I was doing good. And I thought I was helping. I thought I was X, Y, and then I remember, and then all of a sudden there's this mission that impacted me the most. Was here I am, I'm connecting with civil affairs guys and I'm building this relationship, and then all of a sudden I said, hey man, we got this mission, we got these bodies in the airport that we need to turn into the people so they can take them to their families. We need to go and talk to the elders and tribe leaders and see if they can identify them and return them to their families. At that point, I've never seen a body. I've never shot a gun or like nothing. I'm just a college kid, man. I was worried about my crush, if I get to see her again.
Yeah.
You know,
Wow.
if I get
Yeah.
to see my friends, if I get to whatever. So they come to the airport, and as we're driving to certain locations, and I start seeing the bodies, I couldn't take it. At that time, I couldn't breathe. I just sat down and I said, I can't see this. And it was horrible. And I sat down, and that was the first time I was mentally challenged. And then it progressed from that. And we started doing checkpoints, we doing patrols, we started doing other things. And then all of a sudden, after 1 year, we moved from Camp Slayer. I was a Camp Slayer inside Baghdad International Airport. And then we moved us to Camp Falcon. Camp Falcon was about 15, 20 minutes drive, but it was an area called Dora. Dora was it was a hotbed for old Iraqi officers and high-ranking officers. Later on, it became a very dangerous area. So interpreters wise, they moved us from Camp Slayer. We start operating out of Camp Falcon. So, and we're doing missions there. We go in and out. And the thing about Camp Falcon, there's only one road that leads in and out, and everybody gets to see it. And it's right on the highway. Everybody across the highway, it's a residential area, and everybody get to see what's going on. If you have decent binoculars, you get to see who goes in and who comes out and whatnot. It's right there.
Oh, wow.
What didn't help is things start picking up, and Paul Bremer decided to dismantle the Ba'ath Party, decided to dismantle the military. But the problem is Paul Bremer listened to people who have been exiled, been persecuted by the Ba'ath Party. What those guys didn't know is that everybody in the country could not work unless you're a Ba'ath Party. You cannot be a school teacher unless you're a Ba'ath Party member. You have to be a member in order for you to be accepted in society, be able to work and function. And that's a horrible decision to make. Now you got yourself a real war. According to the U.S. military, 15,000 civilians were at the highest month of fatalities. That's just civilians. And look at the soldiers, Iraqi soldiers, U.S. soldiers, and all that. And it impacted everybody. It didn't impact just one particular group. From my side, it was very hard. But now I'm in this situation that in between these two worlds that I am trying to navigate through. But again, there's a big target on my back. So how do I navigate that? So I'm going to go back to camp. There are a lot of translators in that group, and I'm sure you read it in the book and how we end up being picked off.
Yeah.
And a lot of us, it was just getting killed, like 2-3 guys a week. And he's like, man, these guys are my friends. We went to college together. I recruited them. I told them about the job. And so I have this guilt of bringing them in. So it got to the point where we don't know what's going on. And I remember one of my friends, we went to college together. I was like, man, his name is Ahmed. And I said, look, man, this is getting crazy. I don't know what's going on, but we're going to get killed. If we stay here, we're sitting ducks. We can't carry weapons. We're not allowed to carry anything with us when we go on patrol. And it took a long fight just to get a vest and helmet. What am I waiting for here? And he said, yeah, man, let's, I think I'm done. I'm like, all right, we're done.
That was the most terrifying part for me.
Yeah.
Just kind of, because I felt like, how could we be in this situation where you're a civilian, you're actively involved in real life danger.
Yeah.
And you had no weapon. You're basically a liability, right? Like people had to really have to look out for you if you were out when something happened. Just, it seemed like a very, very strange way to treat people who were trying to connect the two worlds.
And that's the challenge with some regular army. So long story short, we went to our company commander and said, sir, we're done. We want to quit until we sort this out and figure this out. We can't work. We got nothing.
Wow.
Yeah. And we took off, and my friend and I took off, and it was just, we lived on a run for about a few months. And
that part was, to me, being in a situation where I don't know how you deal with feeling like there was a loss of humanity. That's what I'm looking for.
Right.
There's a loss of humanity, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can't treat people, or at least I can't treat people as if they are objects,
Yeah.
right? Because you understood that you need to have interpreters. You do.
Yeah,
but
I have to.
if you don't protect the interpreters, then you can't have interpreters.
Right.
And so it was just that part was very difficult for me. And then for you, the part where you were on the run,
Yeah.
and trying to protect your family, and not bring bad guys to your house, but also find places where you could actually live, while you were sorting out what was really going on.
Yeah. Yeah. So my family were actually earlier on, even right about around that time, they had, I remember, so I started making, good money. And first it started with $5 a day. Cha-ching. And then it started increasing as we went on. And then I remember I was going to see my parents. I just bought my Beamer. It was the 735 IL. It's just like my Beamer is excellent. And I went to visit my parents and left my car parked outside. I was worried about it. So I kept getting up throughout the night and just making sure my car is okay. It's not going to get snatched. And man, I think it was like around 2:30 in the morning. My parents' house had like the kitchen, and then from the kitchen there's the front gate, and everything is walled in. And then in between the two metal front gate, the two doors, there was an envelope wedged in between.
Okay.
So I walk out and knew it was bad news. I picked it up. As I held it, I felt there was a bullet inside. Opened up the envelope, and there was a 9mm round in there, and a letter that says in Arabic, "We know all your movements with the American. If you don't stop, we will kill you." And at that point, I knew it's done.
Yeah.
And I woke up my parents and I told them what was going on, and my mom was crying, and I said, "I gotta go. I can't stay here anymore. At least, it'll be safer without me." But I took off and left, and sure enough, I left the neighborhood. So I can see if somebody's following me, I can see them. By the time I made my turn, I saw a car was coming right after me, and man, I love that Beamer. Man, I just floored it. When I called a friend of mine, he had a workshop, a cars repair shop. I said, "Hey man, open the front gate. I need to park my car inside." By the time I got to his house, I literally missed his house. I was just like, "What's going on? What is it?" Like, well, and it's like, "This is what happened." And he's like, "And you came here?" I was like, "Don't worry, nobody followed me. It's just I'm good." I didn't tell him that I saw some headlights behind it. It's like nobody followed me. And we were down to 3 translators that quit. Not 2, sorry, it was 3. And then I started using my whatever money I had, and I started renting places, going from one place into another. And one day, when one of them called me and he said, we're coming to have dinner at your place. And it was like, "All right, cool. Yeah, you guys can come over." And he said, "Did Khalid call you?" That's the other translator. It was like, "No, I haven't heard from him." And he said he's coming. It's like, yeah, it's like, I haven't, I'm calling him and he's not answering. I call him and he doesn't answer. It's like, dude, we started getting restless. And an hour later, my friend called me and he said they just killed him. He was picking up dinner from one of the restaurants and bringing it to, yeah. And then I said, "Well, just come home. Just come here, and I don't have a car in case we need to leave. Like I don't know. Just come to my house." And he said, "Yeah." And I had no reaction at that time, no reaction whatsoever. I was just in complete shock. Now you see there are a lot of killing. Yeah, there was a lot of killing that's happening in the streets. A lot of it. I left that house and went in another house and across Baghdad, and then I had a really vivid dream of him. I passed out and I had a dream of my friend who just got killed, and he came in and he said, it's weird, a mix of Iraqi and English. We always, because we were translators, so we always like, hey dude, and then we continue with it. He said, oh, I remember that dream. He said, hey dude, do you need anything? I'm gone. Man, it hit so hard.
Yeah.
I woke up screaming, and I just calling his name, and I said, and I just started violently crying, and that's the moment where it's all start to come out.
Yeah.
And I cried so hard that I threw up. That day changed a lot. After that, it was within a few days, another interpreter got killed. The good thing is that they found out who was the person who was giving all of our information out. It was another interpreter that was with us in the same group. He knew where we lived. He knew what kind of cars we drove. He knew everything about us there. The few people that he didn't know or didn't know enough information about, those who end up surviving. And that's me, and that's the other guy.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it's an unbelievable story, and it's just so hard to grasp that it's real and it happened to a person or people, because it just doesn't seem real, but that's the situation you were in. It definitely colored a lot of things for you on the go forward, because, not to give away too much of the story sequencing, because I do want people to read this story, because it's incredible. You then made a decision that you were going to go back and you're going to figure out how to still contribute by being an interpreter. But you also but I also want to protect myself, and I want to make sure I'm getting rid of the bad guys. Like, all of these things now were all part of what you were thinking.
Right. Yeah. So that day, it was like, man, I'm full of hate, full of vengeance, and I just want to hurt someone. So I talked to that other translator, that the one that left. His name is Ahmed, and I said, hey man, I want to go back. So we go back to Titan. At the time, we went to the Green Zone. Titan was the company that was contracting for the military and sending interpreters to different locations. I start working with was Special Forces unit, who were training the Iraqi commandos, the 36th Battalion. And at that time, they were at Camp Justice. And then after a while, I think within a year or two, end up moving to BIOP.
Oh.
Yeah, so I went back to where I started.
Yeah.
Different base, but every time I drive by, it's just like I just look at the gate and look at that it was adjacent to the Flying Man. So I just memories there.
Wow.
There's just a lot of memories there. And so and here I am in a different unit, if you will. But I always look back at those days and how innocent really they were. And it was, and it's just the memories of all these guys that they were there, and the hot days and the checkpoints.
As an aside, I'm also fascinated by this taxi situation, because it's like you would jump in a taxi and you go places.
Yeah.
And your experience with American taxis was not the same. And so, my reference point for taxis obviously are American taxis.
Right.
And so I'm reading this and I'm like, how's this guy affording all these taxi rides? But apparently taxis are not the same.
It's not the same. It's not the same. No, it's not. They're a lot cheaper. It's not, and at that point, I can afford that.
And so you, as you go through the timeline, so there's a piece of the story around meeting several very interesting Americans and a lot of the missions that you guys did together. But important or integral to those stories are the friendships and the bonds that were forming, because one of those bonds later is responsible for the whole blow up about you and the visa and coming to the U.S.
Yes.
So because there was one guy who you met early on that eventually was the guy that started talking to you about that change. Right?
Oh yes. That guy's awesome. He was quite a human being, and he was ATM Delta, a medic, and he had a big heart, man. He was very helpful. He was sharp, and he knew what he was doing. And I remember one day I was actually on leave at that time. I was married, and I was in my house, and I got a call from my friend, and he was in Colorado, and he said, "Hey man, there's this program that is starting in the U.S. here. It's an immigration visa." And he's like, "I created this email for you. If you open it, and password is Toshiba. So open up this email and then change your password, and I start communicating with you that way." I said, "Oh, cool. Okay." Back then, if you remember the days where you have the coffee shop, the internet cafes, and you go. And so there was one in the neighborhood. And I went there, and that neighborhood was where my ex-wife used to live. So I went there, and I go in, open up the computer, pick one in the back. There are 2 rows of them. It was like a small shop, but there are 2 rows, and I picked the one in the back, and I was sitting there, and I opened it, typed in the email and password, and I logged in, and I see some attachment, and it says like, "Hey, this is the new program that's happening." And he's like explaining everything for me, and then the instructions and whatnot. So I open up and I see this document, and it had like some seal, USCIS seal. Just, and I was like, here, I was like, "Oh, close, shut off," and Leah like, "Oh, wow." And that was the beginning of it. We start working on that process, and and things start moving forward, and then my dad got killed. Yeah, that was in 2007. That was civil war was already happening. The bombing of the mosques in summer was already happening, and a lot of sectarian violence was happening. Mahdi militia was on the rise.
And so now you have this opportunity to perhaps leave Iraq, but your mother has lost her first husband, then second husband, and her oldest son is thinking about leaving. So there's a lot that you write about in how you battled with the conversation and how you thought about how you would bring it up, and it's kind of some of the conflicts around making the decision that you were going to go and try to find a better life. When you look back on it now, how do you wrap your mind around, I've got this opportunity, but my family is not going to be with me and they are in this same situation?
It was very difficult given the circumstances, that the family dynamics, and also my marriage dynamics. My marriage was falling apart. My ex didn't want it to come, and there are a slew of other things that we talk about in the book. And it was very challenging. And up until that point, I lived my life in a way that is knowing that I'm going to get killed. When that happened, it was that little hope, that little light that I started like, okay, so there is a way out of this. Iraq was chaotic at that time. So you're not thinking about it from my personal perspective, but think about it from, in general, what was going on.
Right.
So everything that was happening in the country, the country is being destroyed. Everybody in the government is corrupt. Everything that's happening around me is just pointing south. And I look at my mom, and I see her struggles. And I look at my siblings who are minors, but I can't go see them. Right. I can't, I'm not able even to go visit. And then we go for years without seeing each other. We just call and talk, and that's it. And then this happened, and now there's an opportunity to happen. And when I started the application, I started with my spouse as part of it. And what made it even worse is now that the person that I'm married to doesn't want to go, and my paperwork is pushed in as married man, and now I can't even get my mom. So it was very challenging. So for her, it was a sacrifice. For her, I'd rather to see you alive and well somewhere else rather than here and with a high chance of me losing you. And that's how it went.
Wow. Obviously, the visa went through. You came to the U.S., but in doing so, like, things transpired and you ended up still being in the military, but on the U.S. side.
Right.
Talk a little bit about that transition, because you got here and things were a little different than you expected them to be, and eventually you're like, what am I good at? What do I do? Right.
Exactly. Yeah, I thought at first when I first came here, it was like, oh man, this is great. I'm not gonna lie, it was like I partied for like a month or two. It was like, man, this is amazing. But it was definitely a culture shock for me to be here and looking around and just see people, everything's normal.
That
and I'm looking and I remember I lived in an apartment very close to Harris Theater, so and I grew up eating Frosted Flakes, and that's the only brand that we had back in Iraq and as a kid. So for nostalgia, like, ooh,
Frosted Flakes. It's a good brand, by the way.
Right. So I go, and it was the first time going into a grocery store. I walk in, it's like, oh my gosh. And I'm looking at the cereal aisle. It's just so many options. I got so overwhelmed that I'm looking at it. And I'm just standing there. I'm just looking around. And I paused. And that pause is just physically, I was at the Harris Theater. But mentally, I was back home.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just thinking of my parents, my mom. I'm thinking of my friends, and I'm thinking it's like all these things.
Yeah,
it's brought tears to my eyes, and
yeah, it's one of those things that Americans take it for granted, the sheer volume, the choice of things that we just do kind of every day, and we don't often have the opportunity to understand that that's not the way everybody experiences life. And there have been a couple of times when I've been able to sit with people from a different country who've had a different upbringing, and the feeling, the overwhelming feeling of being in something like a grocery store, it can actually be incapacitating at some regards, right?
Right.
And so you're in this situation, you at the store, you're thinking about all of these things, and this was kind of the beginning of you figuring out, okay, party time's over. I've got to figure out what am I
I got no
here,
time. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So it's right. Like a few weeks, it was just like, I'm connecting with these guys that are local and stationed at Fort Bragg. And there's another interpreter that was here. That's why I ended up here in Raleigh. And it's like, I cannot fit with civilians. It's just, I thought it was the culture shock. I thought it was, hey, because I'm,
I see.
But I think it was the military sides of me that, after 7 years of just doing missions back to back and just being in that environment, that's all I know. That's why you see a lot of veterans struggle with things that they struggle with, because they know, they've seen things, they had needs, they faced challenges that nobody in the civilian world would understand.
Mm-hmm.
And those challenges, whether it's a loss or a traumatic event that took place, when you go through that, you will never be the same person. It's going to change your life forever, and the way you respond to things is going to be completely different. So I'm looking at what I have now. I have an apartment and I have depleted bank account and I have nothing basically to show for. And any job, civilian job that I would try to obtain here, man, it's like I'm interacting with civilians and I'm not good at it. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go back to the military. I'm gonna do this. I was like, I was so inspired by the guys that I worked with, the Green Berets, and I wanted to get mine. That's what I did. I talked to a recruiter and ended up chatting. Matter of fact, him and I are still friends till today.
Wow.
And it was so cool. And because from his perspective, he said there's not that many recruits. They come in. I would sit and talk to them about mission I did in Iraq. But he's such a kind man, and he was such a cool guy. And then he ended up okay, and then he got my paperwork through, and we started going that way, and then I joined in. I went to Fort Benning and started. Fort Benning was fun. That's the home of the infantry. That's
even as an old guy, because at that point you were older than
I was grandpa for sure. They called me grandpa. At that time I was 29.
It's so crazy to think 29 as an old guy, but
yes, the only person that was my age was the company first sergeant. And even my drill instructors, they were hard at first, for obvious reasons. But we end up connecting on different things. There are a lot of funny situations where it happened in the middle of the training. I'm pretty sure you read it in the book, where this guy thinks that trying to explain to me how what it would be like in Iraq if I ran out of water. It's fun.
And so, the stories about you and Fort Benning and basic and getting through and then starting to make headway toward your career goal, and then some things getting in the way, causing some problems.
Yes.
I think those are all, as you read the book and kind of look at what happened to you throughout your life, all things that were kind of setting you up to be in a better position for what would come later. Of course, obviously you don't know that at the time.
Exactly.
Right? And even for those of us who are kind of reading through, we don't know that at the time, but it all starts to come together. And some of that though is because you met this young lady. And by the way, I grew up near Fort Bragg, so I know very well the drive from that area to this area, and the fact that you were doing it like multiple times a day, it seems, it was amazing to me. Because because you guys were going to the ball,
yes,
right? And I was thinking, he's going to drive here, drive back there, drive back here, drive back there.
That's not the longest drive I've done for her.
But that piece is really, really important, because it set you on a different path by getting to know her. And what I think is key to pull out for this conversation is you had grown up in Islam, had kind of said, nah, that's not for me, and were closed-minded to really thinking about religion in general. So this woman that you were like, this is the one, whether she knows it or not, was also saying, well, I have deep beliefs and we are incompatible because, and you were dealing with all that at the same time.
To go back from the beginning, even of our conversation, growing up as a Muslim and traditional Muslim family, and to going into the war and going into that amount of loss and that amount of just really seeing all that carnage, makes you question a lot of things. So your belief system collapsed. It collapsed my belief system. And if there's a God, how can you let all this happen? All these things that I was seeing, and not just men being killed, no, there are women, there are children getting hurt, there are children being kidnapped, tortured, and hurt in ways that are barbaric for ransom. So your belief system is gone. You're filled with hate. You're filled with all these negative thoughts, and you live in your life in a way that I'm going to die. And so you have that transition, and then coming here and then meeting this gal who said, I have a strong belief system. Right.
Yeah.
I remember there is a time that I was in the barracks and I had another dream. Now this is different than your typical PTSD dream or your nightmares, or I'm running out of ammo, my legs are blown off and I can't run, I can't do this, I'm captured, I'm being tortured, I'm this and that and the other. All that I'm familiar with. And there are other demonic things, that dreams that I had were things come, like 3 little gremlin looking things that are just like telling me faces, weird demonic stuff. Weird. I'm sleep deprived. I don't self-medicate with alcohol and all that stuff. And then I had this dream. Everything was so bright. And I see this silhouette of a man that reaching down on me and telling me I am. I woke up and I'm like, oh, what was that? I'm sweating. I'm shaking. I was like, this is weird. So a friend of mine came in, and I didn't know he was a believer, but I think that was a divine appointment that he was there. I just had this dream, and I just felt compelled to tell him. And I told him, and he looked at me, and he just put his arm around me. He said, Jesus loves you, man. And as soon as he said that, man, I was pissed. I turned, I just looked at him like, F you. Like, don't ever talk to me. Yeah. And that was it. Long story short, I go to Afghanistan, come back, and I invited Hannah. It's like, hey, would you come with me to the ball? I don't know any girl but you. Let me back up a little bit. So Hannah is in the film industry, and she made a film called The Fire in Fallujah. Talked about how about this Iraqi girl meets this American soldier, who end up falling in love, and the background is the Fallujah war that was happening at the time, and how they met and how he's fighting to get her out, and he's not only fighting that war there, but he's fighting for her, trying to get her out. Beautiful story. So she met me as a resource. So that our common friend was like, hey, you should meet this guy. He was there.
He knows things.
He knows things, and be as a resource. So when she introduced us, I thought it was like, oh, just like a friend. So that's how we met. But since then, we developed this relationship that, you know, I talk to her and tell her stories. So when we came back from Afghanistan and we talked some more, we had this ball was going on, and then I said, look, I bought these tickets. You're the only person that I know that, and if you will come with me, and that, you know, be fun. And she finally agreed. She said no a few times, but she finally agreed, and the details are in the book. But we had the great time ever. And by the time we got to the we started driving, and she said, so do you have any nightmares? She started asking me those questions, and I told her, and then we end up telling her about the dream.
Right.
And then she goes, he's like, that's Jesus talking to you. And I said, same thing is 4-letter word, and they're like, F you, don't ever talk to me about it. Don't say these. It's like, never, ever. And she gave me a book called Jumping Through Fires by David Nasir. He was an Iranian guy that left from Iran, came to the States, went through his journey. Now he's a pastor, but he talked about his faith journey coming from Iran. So she gave me that book, and I was reading the book. I ended up reading it 3 times. That book ended up answering a lot of questions for me, coming from a Muslim background, coming from Iraq, my mom and I she wanted to go, we were still in Turkey, and she wanted to go to the Grand Bazaar, go see the Blue Mosque and go to Hagia Sophia and whatnot. And I said, yeah, we'll go and have fun. But right before we go into the Blue Mosque, they have this outside perimeter with these arched gates around it. Right then and there, one of them were trying to go in, and my mom said, yeah, let's go out and pray. And they're just like, right at that moment, right before we go in, I felt a pull on my back, and I just heard this gentle voice that said, you don't belong. And that was it.
Wow.
That was after reading the book, and after all of these things, the dream happened, and all these encounters, those little things, and all these times that I questions, man, I'm supposed to be dead. I'm supposed to be in this truck that got torn to pieces. I'm supposed to be here.
Right.
I was supposed to get captured. There's a gun in the back of my head. How did I get out of that?
Right.
How? I told my mom, you go in and pray. Do your thing. I'm not going in. I turned around, and that was the first time I said my prayer. My first prayer, and I said, I don't know, I looked up, but I just said, all right, if you are real, I believe in you, but you have to do the rest. And that was October 24th, 2002. Yeah, a little over 13 years later, I'm in ministry.
Yeah. So talk about that, because I think that's important. And there's a couple of stories that we'll talk about, but I want you to talk about the ministry for just a bit.
Yeah, I recently started it on Veterans Day, last Veterans Day.
Okay.
But in 2023, since 2012, I started going to church, and I'm, constantly growing that way. But in 2023, by my wife now and I, Hannah, both felt called to go with YWAM, go on a mission field and serve. So we went with youth. Yeah, YWAM is Youth with a Mission organization. It's an awesome organization. We did a discipleship training school there, a Crossroad DTS. We you go there and you spend about 2 months just discipleship, classroom setting, and then 2.5 months of class, and then after that 2.5 or 3 months you go on serve in different country. And while I was in class and I was praying, I always missed the camaraderie. Always wanted to help veterans. The Lord gave me this vision of a ministry to help veterans. One and to focus on 3 areas. One is identity. Second one is purpose, and the third one is dignity. Identity is that mainly that a lot of veterans struggle with post-military, because we assume our identity from our rank or the position that the role that we took in the military, which is not. It's just a job, and it's just a season, and it's over when you get out of the military, and that season is done. Mm-hmm. In reality, you're either a father, you're a son, you're a brother, you're a husband, you're all these things, but what you used to do. But we cling to that. We always want to go back to that because we like that guy. The purpose part of it is what really God created us for. We all created for a reason. We're all saved for a reason. We're not just saved to go to church and and worship and come by out. There's a purpose for each and every one of us that the Lord created us for. What is that purpose that He designed us and created us for? Not what we did in the military. Not my OS, not the mission. Definitely not what the government is telling me. Mm-hmm. And then the last part of it, which is dignity, focuses on helping veterans who are homeless, for helping veterans who are in need, and help them gain life with dignity, live their life with dignity. Whether it's partnering with businesses, obviously helping them go through it's a program that rehabilitate them. We help them re-enter society in a healthy way, and help them fight whatever they're struggling with, drugs, alcohol, whatever the case might be. There's an answer for it. Really, there are core things that we need to tackle, and faith is one of them. I speak from experience, coming from that person who grew up in a certain way, turning a naive kid into this guy that was hurtful and did all these nasty things, and then turned now into this, and a person that really wants to help and really understand who I am and whose I am.
That makes all the sense, and it's now more apparent how the two are connected, mm-hmm. the ministry and the book, right? Because as you follow through the book, you start to draw these parallels, and you see the connections between those things that really should not have been and mm-hmm. that were, and you start to see the doors opening. And I love them. I love the metaphor about the bricks that in Hannah's life, like if they're coming down.
Right.
To me, one of the touching stories in the book, of there are many, but one that really struck me mm-hmm. was your daughter Grace mm-hmm. and her song. And like that one for me rang very true. And then there was another person in the book for whom it rang very true. And thinking about that and the ministry together, it all starts to
It's painful to, especially when you come back. Part of you, no matter what people say, no matter, I don't care. Anybody who have fought there with a friend, someone that you're close to, and you got to come home and they did it, that's very it's very hard to wrestle with. That incident that with my daughter, a lot of us sit at our homes and we sit nice and comfy, and we don't know it. And a lot of times, even I tell my wife, it's like, it's not real life. This is, what are you talking about? But are you connected? I see them, my friends, and I see that time was ISIS was raging, and I'm struggling with the fact that of it is like, well, people struggling, seeing the enemy wreaking havoc in an area that we fought so hard for and we lost guys in, and like, yeah, that's one thing. But for me, specifically for me, it's different. Now my family is involved with no protection, and they're wanted, and I have no way of going back. So how do I deal with that? And then you hear all the guys from the Iraqi unit, the Iraqi commandos. They're very few guys that are still alive. So it hits you hard. And sitting home, I'm comfortable, AC's going, and you have all these lies that are coming into your head, and it is just, man, what is my purpose? Who am I? I don't know who I am anymore, man. I'm used to be this guy that did all these things, and I need to go back, but I can't. It felt like where the things that are nice and comfortable felt like chains. The marriage, the kids, the house is like, what is this? I don't want to be here. I want to go back, but I can't. What about my family? What about my mom? What about my wife? What about my kids? And what?
Yeah.
Down the spiral hole you go. And next thing you know, it's just one news after another, one guy after another. And I'm just found myself literally sitting in the living room, and it's like, well, I have my upstairs in the safe. Maybe if I sit in the bathtub, at least my wife won't have to clean that mess. Now, I'm contemplating. I'm thinking about, and my daughter comes in, and she sits right there, and she sings, "You are my sunshine." And it was that voice. I was in such a dark place. It was her voice that towards the end, I snapped out of it when she said, "Please don't take my sunshine away." In that moment, I just picked her up and hugged her, and I just start weeping. I realized what a big mess I was about to do. Because that was going to be her inheritance from her dad. Her inheritance would never been my dad loved me, my dad took care of me. No. Right. That would be it. Leaving her exposed to whatever that's out there, leaving her fatherless, leaving her to a world that I know how ugly it can be. And that's why I think the conversation is so important. Mm-hmm.
There's so many perspectives that you get from beginning to end. And although the majority of us can't put ourselves in the exact situations,
Right.
there are parallels that you can draw. And thinking through the decisions that you had to make and how those decisions landed you where you are. And then even after making what seemed like a lot of really good decisions, still be in a place where you felt like there was no way out. And then seeing that, being able to find a way, I think is really important.
Mm-hmm.
And there've been a lot of conversations that I've had with a variety of people on the show. There've been a lot of times where I think there are pieces that people just need to hear. And after reading, I really wanted to have the conversation with you because I felt like people needed to hear. And the combination of that, and I love the ministry and what's behind it, because I think there are resources that people need, and you're providing one of those resources.
Yeah. And that's, like I said, going back to YWAM and how the ministry started, it was the two things that the Lord spoke to me and my wife both about me specifically was to start this ministry. And my wife is like, you needed to write the book. Occupied is not, writing it was anything but fun. Think about it.
I can't imagine.
Think about it. I had all these experiences, so many losses. The only way I was dealing with it is alcohol. It's not a healthy way to process or loss or trauma or any of that. It's just, drink up, get up the next day, do the same thing.
Right.
So I remember, Hannah is the writer. I just put it in the story. I put it on paper and I just do a brain dump. And it was like, because I got blown up so many times, man. I forget things. And I just write it down and I explain it to her. And thankfully, my wife understands what was going on. I'm not responsible for whatever happened in the world. I was just a little kid that's trying to do his best. That's it.
If people are listening and they want to find you, how do they do it?
Well, redefinewarriors.com. That's the ministry that I'm doing. And it's local here in Raleigh. And I'm praying that it will grow to the point where we partner with other ministries. And praise God, I got connected with a lot of good ministries around there, are faith-based and who are absolutely incredible. And the other thing is, like, the book is available on Amazon. Purchase it. The information are in there as well.
Now that I know we're neighbors, we're going to have to continue our conversations. It's been really, really great getting to know you. I told you before we started that after having read, I felt like I already knew you because there's so much detail in the book. And now having you sit across for me and kind of talk through things, you're an amazing individual. And
thank you.
And I have not said it, but I will. Thank you for your service.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, man.
Thank you for coming by. If you've made it this far, then I have to thank you for your time. I hope you've learned something new and enjoyed listening to the discussion as much as I enjoyed having it. I'd love to hear from you about the show, because we're working really hard to bring you great content, and the feedback really helps us get better. If you like what you've heard or watched, for those of you who are streaming out on YouTube, then take a split second to give us a thumbs up or a like. It really helps other people like you find the show too. And no one likes to miss out on the good stuff. So go ahead and subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't have to wonder when or if there's a new episode. And until next time, stay remarkable.